Morning all. Excellent talk choice to start your morning off. Well done, you've come to the right one. Welcome to Old Trafford. My name is Tom Maskill. I'm the Chief Client Officer at Webmart. We are a very bright yellow 27-year-old marketing agency, and we specialise in delivering marketing campaigns which are not just mega effective for customers, but also sustainable for our planet. So my role at Webmart is to, first of all, look after our customers and everything client-facing. We work with about 170 brands from Microsoft, Nintendo, Ubisoft, through to Great Ormond Street Hospital, Bernardo's, and then hundreds of SMEs around the country and internationally. The other half of my role is doing things sustainability related. So I work with trade bodies across print, across digital, to look at how we can improve our approach as marketeers to being more sustainable for the planet. So I'm a co-founder of a non-profit organisation called Print Green, and we're all about creating tools for brands and agencies to use to effectively use print in a sustainable way. And then I'm working with leading digital marketing agencies across the country on working out what the impact of digital is and doing something about it. As a business, we at Webmart are a bit different. We have a lot of yellow. We're based in a giant yellow shed, the Yellow Shed of Wonderment, which is down in Bicester, and then we have an office where I'm from in Barnsley. We are a certified B Corp. Hands up if you've come across B Corp before. Familiar with B Corp? Few hands. A few more than when I first did this talk. So B Corp, for those of you who don't know, is the kind of gold standard globally for ethically, environmentally run businesses. So brands like Patagonia, like Innocent Smoothies, like Webmart are all B Corps. There are about 2,000 in the UK. If you've not come across it, give it a Google. It's a fantastic initiative. We're also slightly strange as a business in the way we're structured. So not only do we have weird offices with medieval halls for strategic discussions and cinema rooms for running workshops and watching the England games, but we are structured in a way that we use business as a force for good. So all of the surplus profits we make as a business at the end of the year get distributed to the staff who've been at the business for more than 2 years. All of our passive income that we make through renting out office space, through interest on our bank balances, that's all donated to charity. So we've donated over £800,000 to charities over the last 27 years. And then we also take a chunk of our profits and we invest that in rewilding our 164-acre forest, which we own up in Scotland. So we planted 12,000 trees there. We put in 26 ponds last year. We have an eco lodge up there, which is on Airbnb, if you ever fancy staying it. And it's also free for customers and staff to stay at. As I say, we work with a load of brands, right from small local charities and SMEs, right up to some of the biggest brands in the world, working with them across print, digital, data, and creative. And there's a nice shot of our forest up in Coldingham, about 40 minutes south of Edinburgh, if you ever fancy a visit. That's a little bit about Webmart. We've always been a sustainable business. We've always been passionate about doing the right thing for the planet. We're one of the first to have solar panels on our offices back in the day. But when the pandemic hit and we furloughed a load of staff and customers stopped doing any work, we kept a core team on. And that team's task was to identify what we felt some of the issues in the marketing sector were, and then set about solving those problems. And I was one of those people who, while everybody else was off having barbecues in the sun on furlough, I was sat in spreadsheets trying to work out how we can do better as an industry. And when we looked into it, we found that there were three distinct problems that we could look to solve. The first problem that we came across is understanding that there is an impact to what we do as marketeers. Whether we're sending out print campaigns, we're producing banners, we're hosting websites, we're doing paid social campaigns, email campaigns, whatever it may be, there is an impact to that. And very, very often that isn't recognised, it's not quantified, it's not understood, and therefore nothing's done about it. And I'm going to show you a few stats now that some people have come up to me quite angry afterwards when I've showed these because they didn't believe me, but they are true. Approximately 3.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to digital marketing activities. To contextualise that, the global aviation industry, so these are all flights that happen every day around the world, accounts for around 2.5% of global emissions. So digital marketing has a huge, huge environmental impact, not necessarily through tiny individual communications, but when you add up the billions and billions of communications that happen every day across the world, the servers that are needed to host all of this data, the air conditioning units that are needed to cool them, the fossil fuel energy which is using to power these, it has a huge, huge impact on the environment. And because people aren't necessarily aware of this, because people presume digital to be totally green, I'm carbon neutral, I'm using digital, happy days, nothing's been done about it. So this is something that's increasing year on year. Again, to give you an idea, so the average carbon footprint of a global digital advertising campaign, so say you're L'Oreal launching a new product internationally, you're doing some emails, some paid social campaigns, some banner ads, whatever it may be, the average carbon footprint of that campaign is around 323 tons. Again, to contextualize that, that might mean nothing to you, but on average, each of you going about your daily lives for a year would emit about 10 tons of carbon, just going about driving your car to work and back and living your lives. So it's a significant amount. That was problem number one. Problem number two is there's this perception that sustainability is expensive. And in order to be more sustainable, you need to pay more money. And we felt that that was brought about by a lack of information. So I'm sure you'll have all had this in your jobs in the past. You'll have option A, which is £1,000, or you have option B, which is more sustainable, and it's £1,100. That is not enough information to be able to make a decision. And all you're left feeling is that, right, well, the sustainable option is more expensive, budgets are being cut, can't afford it, we'll look at it later. When it's done properly and we can assess the impact and be smarter about what we're doing to be more sustainable, it doesn't necessarily have to be more expensive, and in fact it can be quite significantly cheaper, as hopefully I'll go on to show you. The third and final issue we came across were misconceptions and greenwashing. So you'll have all seen the Go Green, Go Paperless campaigns, switch to paperless billing, all of that kind of stuff. You might have even done them yourselves. All of these campaigns, or at least the vast majority of these campaigns, were brought about for financial reasons. It's cheaper to send 50 emails than send 10 letters. And the sustainability credentials that we're using to support those claims were spurious at best. And a lot of these organisations are now actually being taken to court over these claims, and they're not able to make them anymore. I'm sure you're familiar with the new ASA, the Advertising Standards Authority's new guidelines on carbon neutral claims. A lot tighter on this now. You can run into trouble if you're not substantiating your green claims. So to summarise the three issues, we've got, first of all, there is an impact. On all the marketing communications we put out here, there is an environmental impact we need to be aware of. Second, sustainability doesn't necessarily have to cost you more if we're doing it in the right ways. And in fact, it can cost you a lot less. And finally, tackling some of the misconceptions in the marketplace brought around by usually inadvertent, but lots of greenwashing over the last decade or so. So that's all fairly doom and gloom. We've then been working for the last 4 years on creating tools and systems that we can put in place to help tackle these problems for our customers. So we created a very, very simple 4-step approach. This is the same approach we use as a business ourselves to reduce our own impact, and the same approach we apply to all of the campaigns we run for our clients to ensure we're minimizing the impact we have on the environment whilst maximizing return. It's a super simple approach. The first step is to calculate. It's Peter Drucker, the old management guru's old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And the same is true within sustainability. And the same is true within marketing. If you couldn't measure the performance of your campaigns, you'd struggle to get budget for it. In the same way, we need to be able to assess what the impact is of the campaigns we're sending out. So first step, work out what the impact is. The second and most important step is using that data, using that insight we now have, how can we mitigate the carbon footprint of the campaigns that we're sending out? How can we reduce them as far as possible? Now, this is obviously important today, but I'm sure lots of you will have net zero goals. It might be 2030, 2040, 2050, whatever it may be. When you come to start tackling those goals, you can't just assess what the impact is and pay to offset it. That's not how net zero goals work. You have to mitigate, you have to reduce your emissions as far as you possibly can before you resort to offsetting. So this approach is going to become super important over the next 5 to 10 years when these net zero targets start to loom. Once we've reduced the carbon impact as far as we can then offset the remainder. So working with gold verified carbon offsetting schemes around the world to offset the remaining impacts of that campaign, so we can make claims like carbon neutral, and we can demonstrate to our customers, to our recipients, to people engaging with our brand, that we're doing things in a responsible and sustainable way. Once we've offset the impact, we can then communicate the impact to the end recipients. So when we're doing email campaigns or paid social campaigns or mailing campaigns, whatever it may be, we can now put on the carbon footprint of that individual email, that individual video on Facebook, so that people understand what the impact is of the campaigns we're putting out there. And my slightly ambitious goal in this area is that when I put up the stat earlier that said 323 tons of carbon, I imagine very, very few of you will be able to contextualize that and know whether that's a lot or a little or sort of all right. If we look at food and calories, and you look at a banana versus a Kit Kat, you know quite quickly that the banana's better for you than the Kit Kat. You know you've got about 2,000 calories to play with a day, and you can easily contextualize the calorific value of food and whether it's good or not. If we put on our marketing communications across digital and physical channels what the true impact actually is, then the public start to see these things more often. They start to see them now on plane tickets and train tickets. You can see what the impact is. If you can see it on emails, on letters, on product packaging, then the general public can start to improve their own carbon literacy and make more responsible and sustainable decisions themselves. Not only that, but communicating the impact also demonstrates to your customers that you're doing things in a responsible and sustainable way. So I've got a couple of examples just to run you through. I've taken one offline example, one digital example to run you through how this might look in practice. These are just some of the tools that we use and we've created. On the screen here, don't worry if you can't read the text, but you've got two basic print specs. So let's say you were going to do a print project, you wanted to do 100,000 booklets, 32-page booklets, and you wanted them to be delivered to your office in Leicester. We get this kind of print specification. Now, we've worked ridiculously hard over the last 3 years to break down this print specification into each of its constituent factors, so paper, plates, cutting, binding, proofing, packaging, delivery, work out what the carbon impact is for each individual element to give us a total carbon footprint. So if we take this spec, again, don't worry about reading all this, but what this is saying is a full breakdown of the carbon impact of that particular project. So in this case, producing those 100,000 booklets, it's about 9.1 tons of carbon to produce that. So this is the calculate part we mentioned earlier. Now we can see that about, 6.8 tons of this campaign is just from the paper stocks. So 6.8 out of that 9.1 tons is from paper. So how are we going to go about mitigating the impact of this campaign? Well, our first focus is going to be on the paper stock. So if we run that spec again, but instead we use a recycled paper stock, we can see what the impact that has. In this case, we've reduced the carbon footprint of this campaign by 1.4 tons of carbon, just by making that little change to the paper stock. And we have this exact same process across all different types of print, across all different types of digital marketing communications. So we can start to make decisions where we can demonstrate there's a carbon saving, justify additional investment if it's needed, and at least track the impact that we're having as a marketing individual, as a marketing team, and as a business. That's an offline example. If I give you an example of this in the world of digital, so we worked with a well-known attraction, and we were looking at their website to understand where we could mitigate the carbon impact. One of the things we looked at was their buyer journey. And we found that they had two different routes to purchase. You could buy vouchers, which took 5 clicks, so reasonably efficient checkout process, or you could buy tickets to the venue, which were 18 clicks. So you had 18 different pages that you needed to load. Now, you'll all immediately be thinking, well, the 5-click one's better. It's better for conversion rate optimization, gets people through checkout, and you're absolutely right, it had a much better conversion rate. What you might not have considered is the additional carbon load that loading all of those pages has on the buyer journey. And when we carried out the assessment, we found that it was actually twice the carbon footprint to buy a ticket than buy a voucher. Now, they had 134,000 transactions going through a year. So just by having this really inefficient checkout process for their tickets, it was emitting an additional 0.5 ton of carbon every year just by not having good conversion rate optimization on their website. So not only can we then improve the CRO from a checkout perspective, but we can save about 0.5 ton of carbon a year just through this buyer journey. Now, what was particularly interesting about this customer in particular was that the least sustainable page on their website was their sustainability page explaining how sustainable they were as a business, which neatly illustrates the lack of awareness of the impact of digital marketing. So this is the mitigate piece. We then communicate the impact, so we put logos and things on mailing campaigns. With pavers, we created a landing page for them so you could scan a QR code on their brochures and it would tell you what the impact was, what we've done to mitigate it, the offsetting schemes we've used to offset that carbon footprint to demonstrate they were doing things in a responsible way. Now, this is all well and good on a campaign by campaign basis, but where this gets really cool is when we can start linking this with commercial performance and commercial data to effectively scale businesses so they work commercially, but do so in a way so they can continue to work from an environmental standpoint. So I picked out a campaign here. This is a campaign we did for a fancy furniture brand. They sold really expensive but really quite nice chairs. We did a door drop campaign for them, so we printed 500,000 leaflets and we distributed them around various postcode sectors in the UK. We calculated the impact of that campaign. It was 37 tons. We reformatted the piece of print we were going to do, and we saved 10 tons of carbon just by tweaking the print specification. So go down to about 24 tons. Following that campaign, about 2% of recipients went and visited the website, and then 2% of those people went on to buy a new fancy expensive chair, so they got 200 new customers. Now, when you're running these kind of performance marketing campaigns, there might be PPC campaigns, there might be direct mail campaigns, whatever. You'll look at the return on investment, you'll look at the cost per acquisition. We can now supplement that insight with sustainability data to create some new metrics that we can work to optimize around. So we can now work out for this particular campaign what the carbon cost per acquisition was for that particular channel. So in this case, to acquire a customer, it was 137 kilograms of carbon to get a new customer. Now we're starting to work with this kind of data. We're working with this client on how can we reduce your cost per acquisition, reduce your carbon cost per acquisition, so we can scale the business in a way which is commercially and environmentally sustainable, so therefore not costing the earth. And this is kind of where we are at now with some of our more forward-thinking customers who are really passionate about sustainability, is not just having financial budgets for the marketing team to work to, but actually having carbon budgets for them to work to. How can we grow within reasonable limits? So not growing at all cost financially, not growing at all cost environmentally, but doing so in a way which is financially and environmentally sustainable. I always like to finish talks with 5 top tips, and these are not just for marketing, but for across businesses in general. The first top tip is around educating yourself. People here familiar with the Carbon Literacy Project? A few nods. It's founded in Manchester, so it's a local initiative for you. And they've created a huge range of different courses. You can do these courses and become certified as being carbon literate. The courses are broken down into industry specifics. You'll spend half a day learning generally about climate change and carbon accounting, and then the second half of the day learning about particular environmental issues in your industry. You get a little carbon literate badge you can put in your email signature, which everybody likes, and it's well worth a look, particularly with it being Manchester-based initiative. Second top tip is linking commercial and sustainability objectives. So some of you may work in big businesses where you have dedicated sustainability person or dedicated sustainability teams. Others of you have been small businesses where either nobody will have thought about it or somebody does it as a bit of a passion project. The way this works really well is if it's linked with your commercial growth and your business objectives. If you can ingrain them, if you can say we need to acquire 10,000 new customers this year and we need to do it for less than 30 tons of carbon, they're objectives that are then owned by the different divisions around the business and can then be achieved. And when you come to net zero goals and really working towards these, That's the kind of buy-in that you need from across the organization. Third is a concept called dark data. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this term before, but on average, about 85% of the data that companies hold is useless. It's either not needed, it's stored in a way which can't be used, it's sat there on the cloud or on internal servers, using energy to store, never ever being used, and being added to every year. There are 3 really easy things that you can do to tackle this. Not only is it going to reduce your carbon footprint, but it's going to reduce your bills because you're going to be paying less to host stuff you don't need. First is doing a digital detox, so doing a bit of an audit as to what you've got stored, getting rid of the stuff you don't need, reformatting the stuff you do need. Switching to green hosting. This is so easy. You switch to working with hosting and server providers which are powered on 100% renewable energy. Doesn't usually cost any more, and it's a really easy, quick win. And then the final thing is maintaining efficiency. So putting processes in place for how you store data, how long you keep it for, when it's deleted, what format it's stored in, so you can continue without having to clear up, as most businesses having to do. The 4th tip, and this is the easiest one, challenge your suppliers. So you will all work with agencies, with print providers, with various contractors across marketing and across your wider business. All I would ask you to do is challenge them. Ask them about their sustainability credentials. Ask them if they can tell you what the impact is of them delivering that product or service to you. Even if they can't answer the question, the more of you who are asking this of your suppliers, the more they have to prioritize it, the more they have to do it, which ultimately will reduce your carbon footprint as an organization and hopefully lead to a more sustainable marketing sector. And the final top tip is to vote with your wallet. So you can choose as an individual, as a company, as a marketeer, how you spend your money, what you want to calculate, what you want that impact to be. Unfortunately for you all, you chose to come to this talk today so you can no longer claim ignorance over the impact of marketing, and it's now entirely down to you whether or not you want to do something about it. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Tom from Webmart. You'll spot us in bright yellow. If you've got any questions or want further info, then we're quite easy to see. Thank you very much.